All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very happy Hanukkah edition of Kabbalah Coffee. Now, when I say Hanukkah edition, we are on the eve of Hanukkah, or the morning of the first night of Hanukkah. So it's not Hanukkah yet, but we are eagerly looking forward to the Festival of Lights. Now, so a few things. So first of all, our discussion, we can't lose focus on what the goal is in these conversations. The goal is to understand a better way of relating to our fellow human beings. The goal is to be able to fulfill the mitzvah, the obligation of love your fellow as yourself in a way that's real, genuine, authentic, and sustainable. Because oftentimes, love your fellow as yourself means I get along with the people I get along with, and everyone else, forget about it, right? I don't get, Bupkis, nothing, right? Don't get along with those people. The goal is to genuinely get along with others, even those whom you and I find it difficult to get along with. If we're getting along with the people that are easy to get along with, guess what? You don't need a mitzvah to tell you that. You don't need a divine commandment obligating you to get along if you're already getting along with somebody. You only need a commandment in Torah, right? I mean, this is obvious. You only need a mitzvah when it's difficult. But then when it's difficult, we say, yeah, I love my fellow as myself, but not this person. Right? They're the exception to the rule. And to that, the Torah says, that's precisely whom you have to figure out a way to get along with. So, the premise of this session, of these sessions, this class, is all about how to get along with someone else. And it's predicated on understanding what is at the core of not getting along with somebody else. And we've been saying throughout the series that the reason why people don't get along with other people is because of the klipa of midjan. Obviously, right? Let me explain. Right? What is the klipa of midjan? Klipa means the evil force of Midjan. The ancient nation of the Midianites represents that which separates and divides people from one another and creates tension, conflict, and hate amongst people. What does it mean? What does it literally mean? What does it actually mean for us in our lives? What quality is that? So we've been explaining that Midjan is the ego. Midjan is the ego that gets in the way. Remember those ego commercials? You know what I'm talking about? Lego My Ego. Lego My Ego is a perfect representation of ego. Lego, ego. Why? Because Lego, my ego. There's my ego and then there's your ego. You didn't think you were coming this morning to hit the Kabbalah of Ego commercials, did you? Okay, that just happened. Right? So, ego is Midjan. Midjan is the ego that divides human beings, that says that I am I and you are you. And now we can't get along with each other because I have my way of seeing things, you have your way of seeing things, and I'm right and you're wrong, etc. All the conflict that we know and love. Good morning. So it's important to understand how it is that we can get ourselves out of that cycle of being stuck in ourselves and putting up walls and barriers between us and other human beings. So a few weeks ago, we introduced the concept of Chachma, and that Chachma is the soul power that represents the opposite of ego, which in Hebrew, ego is yesh, or yeshus, or yeshut, the idea of being, of isness, of I am, and taking oneself very seriously and very importantly. The opposite of which is called bittul. Bittul means self-nullification. It means being a little bit less full of oneself or focused on oneself. It's not thinking less of oneself, it's thinking of oneself a little bit less. And Chachma, the soul power of Chachma, is synonymous with bittul. Why? So a few weeks ago we explained that Chachma is the intellectual power of conception, of seeing something new, of being open to information that you don't already know. Somebody who's curious, who wants to learn, who wants to be a student, who always sees themselves as a student, that is someone who is exercising their power of Bina. Bina says, their power of Chachma. Chachma says, there's what I know, and there's so much more that I don't know. Let me put what I know aside and be open to the possibilities. Whether it's exploring a new topic, whether it's brainstorming to solve a problem that hasn't been solved yet, or whether it's having a conversation with another human being and genuinely listening to them. Chachma means that I have the humility, that I'm humble enough to listen to someone else's opinion even when I get the sense that it's not at all what I think. Because otherwise we're never listening to somebody. We're only filtering and comparing what they're saying with what we already know or believe in, or what we don't know or don't believe in. And so we say, I like what you're saying, which is a code word for, yeah, that's how I think. Or I don't like what you're saying, which is a code word for, I don't see the world like that. And I'm not open to really considering your opinion. The modality of listening, and today we know the phrase active listening, right? Active listening is not just waiting your turn to speak. Active listening means really engaging yourself in that experience of taking in what the other person is saying. Active listening is a process of humility. And I can't say it's synonymous with Chachma, but it certainly leans on the strengths and the energy of Chachma. Because Chachma is intellectual openness. I've quoted this the last 2 weeks, and I'll quote it again. 3 times is, third time is the charm. No, I mean 3 times is a chazaka, so I might as well strengthen this idea. The Mishnah in Avos says in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, Ezahu Chacham halomed mikol adam. Who is wise, who has Chachma, who is a Chacham? Someone who learns from every person. The trait, the power, the quality of Chachma is very specifically an openness to learning, an openness to listening, an openness to gathering new information that you don't already have. The premise of which is, what I have already is insufficient. And there's so much that I don't have. That takes guts to tell yourself that I don't know. To say those words, I don't know, takes strength, which reminds me of another teaching in Pirkei Avot. Chapter 5. It says, Shiva Devarim B'Chacham V'Chilufeihem B'Goylam. There are 7 qualities of a wise person, and the opposite are the qualities of a golem. You know what a golem is? Yeah, remember the golem of the Maharal of Prague? Little Frankenstein? But a golem means also, why was that called a golem? A golem means that which does not possess wisdom. The legend has it that the Maharal, the great Maharal of Prague, who lived in the 1500s, he created this golem using Sefer Yetzirah, using a book of Kabbalah, created life, a life form out of the earth, out of clay, and that helped protect the Jewish people against blood libels and other sorts of harm. And it was very powerful, and it could do whatever the Maharal, the rabbi, told it to do. However, the legend is, it didn't have any seichel. You know what seichel is? I'm pointing to my head. It didn't have any wisdom, no intelligence. So, for example, the Maharal's wife, common sense, right? It was a goylem. It wasn't a chacham. It was a goylem. So the story goes, I wasn't there. The story goes that Maharal's wife, before Passover, needed some extra help around the house. So she says to her husband, can I use the goylem? I mean, he protects the Jewish people at night from all the who knows what's going on at night, all the plots and schemes against the Jewish people. But during the day, I need some help cleaning the house and preparing for the holiday. It's Passover. There's a lot of work involved. So the Maharal says, sure. And the Maharal tells the golem, because the golem was programmed, to only listen to him. Because otherwise it would be easily persuadable for all sorts of, shenanigans. The bad guys could say, don't stop me, and that wouldn't work. So the golem only listened to the Maharal. But the Maharal said, listen to my wife. Fine. So she says to the golem, take a few buckets of water, go down to the river, or whatever it was. This was Prague. Does Prague have rivers? Yeah? I knew that. So go down to the river, and just checking to see how you guys know your geography, clearly. And go to the river, and bring back the pails of water, and fill up the bucket. Put it in the bucket in the kitchen for whatever, mopping, cleaning the floor. Done. She goes out. She was doing some shopping or whatever it was, getting food for the holiday to cook. She comes back. The whole house is flooded. Why? Because she didn't tell the goylem how much after the bucket in the kitchen was full to stop. So that's the legend, right? So he kept on filling, kept on going, getting more pails and more pails until the whole house was flooded. He was still doing his job because, when you program software, if you're a software programmer, so you'll know this, I'm not, but I'm assuming this, is that if you don't tell the program when to stop running, it's going to keep on running because there's no end point. So you got to tell it to stop at a certain point and not keep on replicating that act. So a golem is someone, not only the stone or clay character that the Maharal created, but a golem is a euphemism or a phrase of someone that doesn't have much seichel, doesn't have much wisdom or common sense. So the Mishnah says that there are 7 qualities of a chacham, and 7 qualities, or the opposite qualities, exist in someone who's not so wise, not so a golem. And what are one of them? A golem says, Al davar shalai shamu, amar lo shamaiti. Regarding that which they haven't heard, i.e. a topic that they don't know, they say, lo shamaiti. I haven't heard it. I don't know it. I say it in my own words. The Mishnah says that what is one of the hallmarks of a wise person? Someone who is able to say about something that they haven't learned yet, or haven't heard yet, or don't know, they're able to say, I don't know. As opposed to making up something. It's not wise to pretend that you know everything. That's not wisdom. That's falsehood. That's manipulation. That's pretending. What wisdom is defined as the humility to be able to say, Lo shamaiti, I don't know. I haven't learned it, I haven't heard it yet, I don't know, I don't have the answer. If you want, let's explore the question together, maybe we'll come up with something nice. But if you're asking me about something definitive, like, what's the answer to this question? To be able to say, I don't know, is not a sign of weakness. And it's really not even a sign of strength, as much as it is a sign of honesty and humility. When I say strength, I mean it's not powerful. It's not about power. It's about honesty and humility. But notice that the way it's described in the Mishnah is that these are qualities of a chacham, someone who's wise. I'm sure you want to know what the other 6 qualities are at this point, right? What are the other 6 qualities? I'll be right back. I don't remember all. Do I need to explain that last line that I just said, or you got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Just making sure. Just checking. Okay.
That was a demonstration.
That was a demonstration.
Yeah, that was very good.
That was modeling.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't build out the runway that I was looking for. Oh, you mean...
No.
All right. Let's move along. So, here we go. Yeah. Okay, 7 things characterize a golem, and 7 a wise person. A wise person does not speak before one who is greater than them in wisdom or in years. That's number 1. The humility not to need to speak first. To allow someone who's older or wiser to have the first statement in a conversation. Humility. A wise person does not interrupt the words of their fellow. A wise person does not rush to answer. A wise person asks what is relevant to the subject matter and replies on point. So the questions are on point, and the responses are on point. A wise person speaks of first things first and of last things last, which could be understood in a few different ways. Either prioritizing what's first and what's last, or when asked a multi-part question or multiple questions, responds to the first question first and goes in order of the questions, which honors the questioner because you're honoring the way they are exploring the issue, as opposed to reframing it in a way that may throw off the questioner. And concerning that which they have not heard, they say, I have not heard. That's the one that I mentioned. And a wise person acknowledges the truth. And the reverse of these characterizes a golam. I think they all have to do pretty much more or less with humility. Ability of being able to put someone else first, being able to listen, being able to acknowledge that one doesn't know, etc. Chachma is intimately connected. The power of Chachma, which is wisdom, which is not just about accumulation of knowledge. Wisdom is about openness to learning and honoring the art of learning and honoring the wisdom in someone else and in the universe. The power of Chachma is intimately connected with Bittul, with self, with the ability to put oneself on the side and be humble. And so our discourse, which is all about teaching us tools to how to love someone else, how to get along. When I say love, I mean how to love our fellows as ourselves, getting along with someone else. Our discourse says the key to that in the human condition, the source of the ability that we have to get along with someone else is our ability of our power of Chachma. We have this power, this unique gift of Chachma. And when we leverage that, not just to learn, but to train ourselves to be open to new ideas, that is the key to getting along with another human being. At the end of last week's session, we posed a question. And we asked that there seems to be a contradiction because in other sources in Kabbalah it says that beginning from intellectual inquiry is where subjectivity emerges. The moment a person takes an idea and begins to understand it is the moment that they begin shaping an idea in their own unique way, which may necessarily be different than the way someone else shapes an idea. So if you look at the idea itself, someone knowing the idea, the way ideas exist on their own, like a tree that falls in the forest and no one's there to observe, right? So an idea in isolation, an idea in a laboratory, no scientists around. The idea itself is objective. What do I mean by objective? It's an idea. It's a concept. It is. It's a truth. It is. When it's understood by someone, now it takes on a slightly different form. What different form does it take on? As objective as you and I are, it's the concepts that we know are still being shaped on some level by us. We put somewhat, even subtle, but somewhat of an imprint on the ideas that we know, based on the way our minds work, our intellectual capacities, based on our emotional dispositions, based on our past experiences, i.e. a nice combination of nature and nurture and everything in between. We necessarily somehow model ideas or form ideas in a way that works for us, that works in us, and therefore may necessarily be different than the way somebody else formulates that idea. So the way the idea existed before being known was objective. Once it's known by two people, we might say now you have two ideas. There's the idea as known by person A and the same idea known by person B, and they may not be the same idea, the way they're known. The way they are pre-knowledge, it's the same. The way they are known, it might be a little bit different. So therefore, we might acknowledge that in this room, anything that I might say, anything that we might learn in this class, may be understood in any number of different ways by every individual in this room. Because no one understands the same thing the same way. Just like no two faces are alike, you may be thinking, what about identical twins? I don't know. The Talmud says, just like two faces aren't alike, so too two minds aren't alike. Like faces, like fingerprints, like DNA. I'm now expanding the original Talmudic statement. Like snowflakes. No two minds are alike either. And therefore, I'll understand something one way, you'll understand the same thing a different way, and this creates a diverging of ideas. You started off with one, and now you have two plus ideas. So this was the question. We just said that Chachma is the idea of humility, of bittul, of being open to ideas as they are. At the same time, we know that once the intellectual process kicks in, ideas begin to be framed by the mind in a very subjective way, which could create dissonance, separation, and distance between one person's way of understanding and the other's. So what is the intellectual ability? Is it something that creates connections or creates distance? Does it create love or can it create conflict? Of course, the answer is both. But we're trying to understand. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. But we're trying to kind of break down. It does both, but under what circumstances, under what conditions will it more likely lead to connection? And under what circumstances will it more likely lead to friction and separation? And the key idea we ended off last week's class with was that the more chachma we have in the entire intellectual process, which can be very subjective, the more openness and humility we have in the entire process, the more objective will be, even within our subjective understanding. Which means that even as we understand it one way, we'll know that there's another way to understand it that may not resonate with me intuitively, but I know intellectually that there's another way to see it, and I honor that as an equally valid way. In fact, I'm able to take one concept and break it down into many different ways of learning, many different ways of understanding, and recognize how they all represent a truth of the larger concept. And by understanding all of the layers or ways to understand this one idea, I'm understanding the core idea better, even though I may gravitate to one such path. I recognize multiple paths, and I recognize the truth of those multiple paths, the truths within those multiple paths, and I recognize furthermore that only by knowing more than one am I touching on the highest truth. Does that make sense? So now let's jump right in. Yeah.
So in this model, where the way we're thinking about that, we're thinking about it in terms of the idea and then the individual person, how they're constructing their understanding, then person to person. In the reality of the world too, there's several other layers. One of those layers is the system in which this is occurring. So an education, sort of as a go-to, is that if in fact it's true that in a room full of children, they're understanding in a different way, yet they're all being subjected to an assessment that says this is the way that you're supposed to understand it, and if you don't understand it in this way, then you're failing, you're not passing, and so on. So the signal, the message that they may be getting is that while I appreciate your different perspectives, this is the way that ultimately
There's only one right way.
There's one right way, yeah. And so it's the systems are set up, not all of them.
Not to support
there are
this.
Educational, as we've talked about,
Yeah.
systems that are moving away from that. But overall, there's a system, even in workplace, this is the way that it's supposed to be, that's supposed to be done. So there's that push of the place that we're in right now.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's very,
So profound.
isn't it powerful?
So true.
That's very powerful. And I think, number one, hopefully, we're going to start, we will start, we are starting, moving away, change the system. There's also truth in that system. But recognizing, right, that there's to honor different ways of not only learning, but different ways of understanding, right? And I think it's a very important, what you said is very important.
That's your next book. That'll be your next
I have so many next books. In a good way, only in a good way.
Well, that's the title of a book by a famous feminist author, Carol Gilligan, Different Ways of Knowing. So she talked about gender differences,
Interesting.
and ways of perceiving and understanding.
And she
Nice.
wrote in response to Larry Kohlberg, who was designing the ways of knowing based on just a very male way of knowing.
Yeah. I don't ascribe to her particular brand, but anyway.
I'm loving this conversation. This is great. No, I'm this is amazing. Love this. Yeah.
I don't know if I want to bring it up or like, don't you? So you need some basic norms to govern the way people interact with one another. It can't be anything goes. Wouldn't a certain moderate imposition of norms be gevura in its tempered state that's necessary and good?
I think the mind, it's a great question. If you look at gevura, which is all about creating boundaries, which are healthy, because you need boundaries. So if you look on the chart, which I don't have right now, but if you have a chart or if you know the chart, above gevura is bina, right? Above gevura, so chesed is chachma chesed, and then bina gevura. So above gevura is bina. Bina is similar to gevura in that it does create that shaping. I think that we inherently are good at shaping and defining. And I think the muscle that we're suggesting to flex, to get stronger at, is the chachma. I don't think that we're in danger. I don't think right now we're in danger yet. There might be a model where that is being threatened, where there are no boundaries and ideas are being discussed so freely, and there's so much acceptance of other ideas that it's actually harmful. There may be that possibility, in which case one may have to kind of put some parameters around the discussion. I would maybe liken it to a meeting that's about a kind of brainstorming session that gets so vague and so off topic that nothing productive comes out of that meeting, and we get no closer to any resolution or to any movement forward than when we walked into the room. It's maybe even more even more distracting. So that might be one example in the workforce where you do need some boundaries around the conversation and to kind of guide it into a productive, forward-thinking model. At the same time, I think for most of us, especially in the context of this discussion, which is all about interpersonal relationships and really being able to honor someone who doesn't see the world as we might. So I think that the muscle that we're seeking to flex and to strengthen is the chachma muscle, which is the openness to the other opinion. But I agree with you that one without the other, you always need that balance. But I think, when you have a paper that's bent, if the corner of the paper is bent one way, you can't just straighten it out. It's still going to remain bent. The only way to bend it is by going the other way, the other extreme almost, and then you'll go back somewhere in the middle. As Maimonides says, every midah, every human characteristic has polar opposites and a center, right? So there are extremes of anything, right? Extreme chesed, extreme gvura, extreme whatever personality trait a person can think of, you can have an extremes of that. And Maimonides says that extremes are typically not good. It's always, he says, identify this extreme, identify the other extreme, and aim for the center. Aim at the center. In general, in life, it's always good to be in the middle of extremes. He says, but if you find yourself in one extreme and it's not healthy, then you can't just try to center it. You may have to go a little bit for a certain amount of time, the other extreme, to then go back into the center. That's the way it is. He does say there are certain traits in which we have to be extremists about. Like, for example, anger. He says you have to be the opposite extreme of anger. Like, it's not good to be a little bit angry or in the middle angry. It's like, anger is not good. It's devastating for the own person, let alone for others. So it's devastating to the person's own health and character. So he says go the other way when it comes to anger. That's just one example, but point well taken. So Chachma is about openness, even within the intellectual process of subjective understanding. The way to experience Chachma is I break down an idea and I form an opinion on it, and then I keep on going to almost form other opinions on the same idea, understanding how this one idea could be understood in many different ways. Even though I understand it in one specific way, perhaps, I can see a truth in other different ways. Make sense? All right, so let's talk about this in the context of fire and water. Really fascinating conversation. I have new copies. So these are the previous booklet that I had that you may still have were chapters 1 through 5. This is 6 through, I want to say 11. 6 through 11. Chapter VI through XI. So 6 through 11. So please take one and pass it around. I'm sure we'll have extra copies. It's okay, just leave it wherever they land, leave it, and then if somebody else walks in by any chance, so then just help them out with a copy. Okay, I'll read inside now. It's not going to start exactly in the place that we just left off in this intro, but you'll see very soon how we're going to lead into this conversation. Okay, this is page 12. By the way, in case you're wondering, usually we have books that are available where you can actually get the book. Instead of these copies, you can get the book. Challenge here is that the book is out of print and has been out of print for a few years. So the publisher has made these the text available in digital form, and we printed it out, but the publisher has not yet republished it. As soon as they've republished it, we'll make an order. Page 12. To clarify further. Okay, you ready? We're about to get Kabbalistic. So the language, I try to speak in somewhat contemporary language, even though I throw around, some Kabbalistic terminology and Hebrew terminology, but I try to speak in a understandable way. It's going to be a little bit coded language. I'll do my best to explain it. To clarify further, concealed within each thing is its antithesis. Yeah? Each of the essence powers, i.e. essential faculties of the soul, has its antithesis incorporated within it. So he's making a statement, the author. This is the 5th Chabad Lubavitch Rebbe, known as the Rebbe Rashab, Rabbi Shalom Dovber. And he's saying that every essence power has its qualities and contains its opposites qualities inside of it as well. Let's continue. This is so by virtue of its essence, its atzmos, which is of a higher level than even the essence powers and contains all of them in perfect synthesis. He's saying the essence powers, known in Hebrew as the kochot atzmiyim, the essence powers derive from the essence. These are powers that are derived from the essence, so they're called essence powers. But they're powers that are deriving from the essence. Because they all come from the same essence, by definition, essence is that which is undivisible. If essence was divisible, then that's not essence in the language of Kabbalah. Essence is that which is undivisible or indivisible. So, in the essence state, the essence contains all of the subsequent essence powers in perfect synthesis in a way that's beyond. Okay, I know I just cut myself off in the middle of a sentence. Trivial Pursuit. Do you remember Trivial Pursuit?
Yes.
So for me, it's been a while. Did I speak about this recently? I may have thought about this recently. Trivial Pursuit. Do you remember the pieces of the game? It was like a round circle that had different pie pieces, pie cutouts, and different colors. And you had to land on different places on the board and answer a question that is coded, the topic of the question: sports, entertainment, culture, science, history, geography. I'm making up categories now, it's fine. You had to answer questions categorized by or symbolized by the different colors, and if you answer the question correctly, you get one slice of the pie with that color. Pink, yellow, orange, blue, green. Yes? No? So one way of looking at essence is that it's the container, the pie container, that contains all the different slices, all the different colors, right? Those are all slices of, those are all the soul powers, and they come from the essence. In the essence, you had all the soul powers that will eventually emerge. You have them, the essential state, as different pieces of the pie inside that soul essence. That's not how that's not how it works. I don't know if I did a good enough a job of explaining how we might have thought it works to then say that's not how it works. But it is what it is. I don't know that I can do more Trivial Pursuit at this point. But think of any pie or any pie chart. Draw a circle. One circle, which is going to represent your essence. That's one essence. And in the essence you have this power, that power, that power, that power, that power. So from the essence they emerge into their own units, their own beings. But before they emerge, they started off as part of that original pie. That's not how essence is. In essence, you don't see the different pieces of the pie. It doesn't look like there's chesed inside the essence. All you see is essence. Essence, as I said before, is indivisible. Because if you had all the pieces in the essence, then the essence is cut up into different pieces. Then there's no such thing as essence. You have an original slice of chesed, an original slice of gvur, original slice of etc., right? So you don't have anything called essence. You with me on this? Right? Essence is not the state of unique powers as they were hanging out together under the same roof, because those are still distinct powers. And you still have a divisible essence, and that's not essence. Essence is a state of singularity. Complete singularity. It's a one thing that is indivisible. It's not a composite being of many different things that will ultimately emerge into many obviously distinct things. It's not a composite state. It's a singularity state. It's a completely unified state, but even unified is a misnomer, because unified implies diversity that's unified. This is not diversity that's unified, this is singularity. The difference between one and soul, S-O-L-E. One implies a 2 and a 3 and a 4. When you say 1, right, someone's going to say 2, 3. I don't know if anyone's going to do this. But, right, 1 implies one of multiple. And if you say that there's now oneness, it means that you took many different things and you put them together and you have oneness. That's not what this is. This is not echad, this is yachid. Echad is one, yachid is the only one. It's different. Yachid means soul, S-O-L-E. The only. So essence, the state of essence. Are you guys? No. So yachid means. No, we'll get to you in a second. Yachid means it's the only state. No, what is it?
No, I didn't quite raise my hand.
Oh.
I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
the true meaning of essence. I'm struggling with that. So I looked it up and it just says the basic nature of a thing, the quality or qualities that make a thing what it is.
So that's one definition of essence. That may not be the same thing as what we're talking about here. We're talking about essence is defined in Kabbalah as a state well, there's a few things that it says about essence. Number one, it's not revealed. It's not divisible. So it's hard to explain because it's almost beyond. The definitions that we usually have are things that we can grab onto. It's been defined already, so we can hold on to something. You can hold on to something with the surface, right? I can hold on to this because it's defined. Essence is really an undefined state. So how do we define an undefined state? By calling it undefined, right? Or by saying it's a unified state of singularity that is indivisible and not revealed.
But it's a piece of the pie.
No. It's the pie, it's the totality of the pie before it's in pieces. Or before it's even a pie.
It's the is before the is.
So you know the expression, the whole is not equal to the sum of its parts?
Yeah.
Is that a similar?
Maybe.
Okay.
The difference between that maybe is that the sum as a whole, you could put together all of the powers in one place and have that collective energy, and it could be greater than the sum of, it could be greater than the parts themselves. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Sum of the parts?
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's essence. Essence is even higher than that.
Okay.
Essence is even loftier than that.
Mm-hmm.
Essence, it's so hard to define essence, even though Kabbalah speaks about it so often. But essence is so difficult precisely because it's so high. It's so lofty. It's like you know it when you get to it. Okay.
So what
No,
is the qualitative difference between that expression and this higher level?
you know what essence is? You know what essence is? One way of understanding essence, again, this is not necessarily what we're talking about here, is when we speak of, I'll just reference Julie because Julie was here at our session Thursday night, our Kabbalah session on Hanukkah, and we talked about how when people, God forbid, go through trauma, how Judaism maintains and believes, and on a soul level, that there's part of the soul that can get affected by the difficulties, the hardship, the trauma that we go through, but the essence of the soul is not affected by. So this is one way in which the essence is identified, sort of. It's that which is beyond. It's not the part that's invested typically in our everyday activities. That which is out there can be affected by what's out there. But the essence is so much deeper than that. And because it's deeper than that, another way of explaining it. It says it says in Kabbalah, you can extract fire from different places. You can extract fire from a hot coal. If you have a burning hot coal, right? So you can put, say, on a barbecue, old school, not the gas grills, right? Old school, coal, charcoal, what's called the briquette, briquettes? Briquette? Yeah. Sounds like a Radio City Music Hall show. Anyway, so you can take a piece of paper, you have a white hot coal, take a piece of paper and hold it to the coal. What's going to happen? Catch on fire. Put your hand near it. It's going to be very hot. Don't put your hand near it. Right? But put anything near it. Take a temperature. It's going to be very hot. You can also extract fire, not from a coal, not from a hot coal, but from a stone, from a flint stone. Bum, 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 bum. Right? Yabba, dabba, do. You can strike the flintstone, create a spark, yeah, and from there create fire. So what's the difference? Two ways to extract fire. They both produce the same fire on the outside. Once the fire is produced, it's the same. You can't measure a qualitative distinction between the two types of fire. Once it's a fire, it's a fire. And you measure, you study it with a microscope, I don't know, whatever it is. You study it scientifically, you're not going to see any distinction between the two fires. But one originated, huh?
Color. Different things burn different colors.
That's when it's burning. I'm talking about the origin of the fire. In other words, as it's however it's burning now, it could be burning on two different. It could be burning from oil, it could be burning on wood, right? Two different. It could be burning something else. But the fire that's produced from these two methods, it will be the same fire. Whatever it's holding on to now might be different, but the fire itself is the fire. The fire is going to be the same. So what's the difference between the sources? So in one, the fire existed in its concealed state, the fire was revealed. And in the other, in its concealed state, the fire was hidden. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. In both cases, a coal or a flintstone, you don't see the fire. You see a coal, and you see a stone. You don't have the fire. So we're calling that state, but in both cases, the concealed state of fire, because you don't have the revealed fire, it's the level of concealment. But the coal in its concealed state, the fire is there. There's actual heat, right? So it's not revealed on the outside, but on the inside, it's absolutely revealed. In the flintstone, there's also the power of fire, because from whence did it come if there wasn't that spark inside, or the potential for that spark? So there has to be a fire. Again, I'm using these terms obviously loosely. There has to be a fire inside, but in its latent, concealed state, it's not revealed. So there's a state of concealment that's revealed, the coal, and a state of concealment that's hidden, which is the stone. Does that make sense? The difference being, when it's revealed in its hidden state, it can also be affected and tampered and destroyed. Whereas when it's concealed, it's much harder to destroy it because it's so withdrawn. If you take a hot coal with tongs and you drop it into the ocean, yeah, and then somehow you rescue it, good luck, number one. Number two, what about the fire? What if I take the flintstone and drop it into the ocean and I rescue it and I dry it off? I can still produce fire. Because its fire in its concealed state was not revealed, therefore, it's not affected by external conditions. Because it's so essential to the stone, are you with me on this? Because it's so essential to the point that you don't even see it. That's a definition of essence, that it's not revealed, even in its concealed state. It's still there, and the greatest proof is that from there can produce a fire. So something's there, the potential for the spark, but there's no actual spark there. Does it make sense? So because it's an essence state, it's impervious to harm or to being damaged. So in a similar way, we have this notion of the human soul, where there's part of us that's out there. There's part of us that's in there, but lending itself to out there. And then there's part of us that's so deep, it's so essential, that it's not out there at all. It's not revealed even in its concealed state. That's the part of us that never gets affected by external conditions, circumstances. It's the part of us that can go through, God forbid, we should never experience this, that can go through extreme difficulty and still maintain a sense of love and hope and hopefulness and purpose and meaning, and from there reignite one's life, in essence, from that essential Flintstone level, so to speak, because it was never out there to be destroyed. Yeah, that's it. So that's the best definition of essence that I can give. Essence is like the spark in the Flintstone, where you don't even see the spark. It's not like you took, again, the example of the pie is, so there's fire on the outside, so instead of it being on the outside, we put it inside, and now it's like, it's covered, but it's in there. That's not essence. That's the concealed state. Again, concealed is maybe not, I'm using Kabbalistic language, hopefully it makes sense in English. It's the concealed state of revelation, but it's basically the same thing, just in a package. Essence is not that. Essence is much deeper than that. Essence is the potential state of that, not in an obvious way. It's not like you have an actual spark that's burning inside the stone.
Right.
The stone just has the substance of which a spark can be produced from, which is a different thing.
It's an unmanifest potential.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
What did you say?
It's an unmanifest potential.
Right? It's a potential that's not manifest, as opposed to a manifest potential, which is where you see it on the inside, or as opposed to manifest actuality, which is something else. You have really three levels. You have the fire on the outside, the fire in the coal, and then the spark in the stone. Three different levels. I'm not saying, by the way, that the Flintstone spark example is a perfect analogy for the essence state of the soul or of reality. But it's one analogy that's used in Kabbalah to try to get our heads to try to help us understand this a little bit better. So it's no physical analogy to spiritual realities is ever going to be perfect, but it's something to allow us to imagine or to conceive of different states of reality. Marnin.
All right. My thought is that it's beyond potential. It is. Potential is for the future. You know, potential lies there. It's not potential. It is. It's there.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the limitations.
May happen.
Exactly. And one of the limitations that we have with language is that the language is going to be imprecise. Potential in Hebrew is koach, which also means power. And in an essence state, there is no koach. That's really his point of this opening few lines of chapter 6. You don't have the power. The essence powers are not in the essence. The essence powers will emerge from the essence, but the essence powers are not in the essence, because that would mean that the essence is divisible into different slices of powers. And that's not what essence is. So there's not a... Yeah.
Could I give like an example of what I believe is happening?
Sure.
When you talk about someone's soul, I can almost go back to when someone is traumatized, maybe from the childhood on up to adult. Well, down in that person, there was something hidden, and they never knew it was there. Well, when the right thing came along, maybe something like they needed something, and then all of a sudden they rise up, and they become that person that they are supposed to be. Is anything like that?
Yeah. I think that many...
They emerged and they came forth.
Kabbalah believes that every human being has a pure essence soul from which the greatest potential, even again potential, we're getting stuck in language, where the greatest things can emerge from. And that piece of us cannot be affected, altered, tampered with, marginalized, compromised in any way. It's a powerful testament to the belief in the human soul.
Yeah, I have a problem with this part where there's a essential oneness beyond one.
Yeah.
Because of the Shema, Lord is one. So what is beyond that?
Yeah. When we say in the Shema, very good question. When we say in the Shema, which comes from Deuteronomy, it's a verse. When we say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. We're talking about oneness within diversity. We're not necessarily talking about the only, the Yachid. It's a different, it's actually, your question is really the answer. In other words, you're exactly right. It's not talking about the dimension of essence. We're talking about the dimension of one within diversity. In fact, that's why it's explained that the word echad is comprised of 3 letters, aleph, chet, and dalet. The aleph is 1, the chet is 7, which corresponds to the 7 heavens and the earth. 7 plus 1 is 8. So aleph, ches. We're doing Jewish. We just transitioned into numerology here, in case anybody's wondering. So every Hebrew letter corresponds to a number. So aleph is the first letter. The aleph bet. Aleph is the first. So aleph is within echad. Echad means 1, but it's comprised echad. It's comprised of 3 Hebrew letters. Aleph, the first letter is 1. Ches is 8. Aleph, bet, gimel, dalet, hey, vav, zayin, ches, or chet. So that's the 8th letter. And that represents the 7 heavens and the earth. And dalet, echad, the aleph, bet, gimel, dalet, that's the 4th letter, represents the 4 directions, north, east, south, west. And the message is that God is one amidst the 7 heavens, the earth, and the 4 directions, which means that there's oneness from the diversity. Although there seems to be, the universe seems to be very large, going up and going this way. Are you with me? Right? The earth in the 7 heavens is a vertical a connotation. The dalet, that's the ches. The dalet is northeast, southwest, right? That's directional this way, right? Laterally, so horizontal, vertically and horizontally. The universe and beyond, right? Very vast and very broad. Still, God is the aleph. The God is one within all of that. It all comes back. It's all part of the same oneness. That's the message of Shema. That's not the same thing as essence. You're right. It's not the statement of essence, which is beyond the diversity, which is pre-diversity. So his point here is, let's jump back inside. This is just explaining the first sentence, or first 2 sentences. All right. So he just said, let's put it back inside and contextualize what we're talking about. He explained that essence powers, not essence, the essence powers contain a measure of its antithesis. Every essence power is a uniquely defined power, but they all contain at least a measure of the opposite power. It contains its antithesis inside of it. Why? Because all of the essence powers come from the essence. And in the essence, they were all one. Not in a way of we were all hanging out together in the same pie, but they were all one in a way that preceded their own unique identity. Are you with me on this? Mm-hmm. They were in a state of oneness, of onlyness, of singularity that preceded their uniqueness. Let's continue. For example, by the way, before this, for example, he wasn't even talking about souls necessarily. He was talking about conceptual spaces. You have essence powers and essence. And essence powers always contain a measure of their antithesis, the antithesis power within it, because they come from the essence. And in the state of essence, the essence contains all of them in perfect synthesis, not in a way of divided, but in a way of perfect synthesis and singularity. And he gives an example, the soul powers. For example, the essence of the soul transcends the essence powers contained within it and thus bears them all. Let's continue. Within the essence of the soul, the powers coalesce in total unity, and here's the key line, and do not exist as separate particular powers, and here's even the more important line, not even as essence powers. You see that? In their source state, essence state, the essence powers don't even exist as essence powers. It's not like you have just thinking of I can't get this image of trivial pursuit out of my head. It's not like you have the different pieces that are out there, and then the essence state is as they are contained in the same pie, right? The way they were all contained in the same space. Because if that were the case, then in that space you would say, this is an essence power, that's an essence power, and that's an essence power, and that's not how it is. Let's continue. While they cannot be discerned as individual entities, they are still powers. What he means is, in a state of essence powers, even on that state, not essence powers. Are you with me on the different levels where we have essence and then essence powers and then reveal powers? So in a state of essence powers, while they cannot be discerned as individual entities, even in the state of essence powers, you can't truly divide them in a major way, but there's still powers on that level. Nevertheless, it is a logical imperative. Oh, one second. So now you might say, well, if the essence powers don't exist as essence powers in the essence, so maybe nothing exists in the essence. Going back to the Flintstone, maybe there's no spark. So he says, nevertheless, it is a logical imperative. You have to say that the essence includes all the powers within itself, for all the powers do emanate from it. They couldn't emanate from it if they weren't there somehow, somewhere, some way, in a different way, but it had to somehow, it's the source of it, so it has to have some sort of relationship. It's like, again, maybe the best example right now that's hitting my head, not the pie, is the spark, the fire that comes from the Flintstone. So we have three things: the stone, the spark, and the fire. So the spark is not yet fire, but it's going to lead to fire, right? And the stone will not lead to a spark, given its own devices, right? It's not like, I left the stone there and next thing you know. Leave a coal there, that may happen because the state, the concealed state of this still has the fire, and therefore it can naturally emerge, given, almost with natural conditions, almost. A little wind, a little kindling, whatever it is. Whereas the stone is not going to lead there. But you can't say that the spark and subsequently the fire was not at all in the stone. Because then, as he says here, where would that come from? Right? And the fact that it does come from there means that it is there on some level, but in an essence state. So he says again, getting back to the essence of the soul, the essence of the soul contains the essence powers, but not in a way of distinct, individual, defined soul essence powers. First of all, they themselves are not so distinct, but it's not in a way that it's not sourced there in an open way. It's sourced there not even in a closed way. It's sourced there in a potential way. This being so, let's continue. I don't think what I just said gave any more clarification, just kind of restating this point. Okay? Let's continue. This being so, it is clear that they are included in such a way in the essence that they are as one. All of the essence powers, as they are found in the essence of the soul, are all unified, with no differentiation of any sort. There's no chesed, there's no gvura, they're all there in a potential state, but not in a way that they're there to be enumerated and labeled. This concept is look at this. You knew what I was saying. Kidding. This concept is related to the idea of Yachid, soul, as opposed to Echad, one, which implies the existence of others. So one implies 2, 3, 4, 5, whereas Yachid implies soul, only one. It's not one, it's only one. As the essence powers are in the essence, they're on a level of Yachid, only one. It's not that you have, let's say 7 essence powers unified as one. Nope. You have only one entity, from which 7 will emerge. It's a different paradigm.
Kind of like one light, and then like the different 7 colors can come from it, but you don't like rip apart white light and there's like red and green
right.
and all that stuff.
I like that way of
it's all white,
right.
But it
Right.
inside the white. It's not like there's red and green and all that stuff going on in
Right.
there. It's just one color.
Yeah, we could look at it that way. Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, yeah, then it's got this potential of colors.
Right, but it's not in there.
But it's not like it's not like merged together and then you're separating it out.
Right.
It's let's just finish this paragraph quickly because so what's the point of all this? There's a point here. Remember, it's all about synthesis. It's all about unity. So because they are unified at the level of essence, then even when the powers descend to exist at the level of particulars, not essence powers, but even lower, to open revealed fire, there's 3 levels, right? Essence powers, and then revealed powers. So even as they become fully emerged as distinct powers with their own particular qualities, very different than the other quality, each includes its antithesis in a concealed state. Because they all began at an essence state, not just on the same team, but in a perfect state of oneness, not even oneness, of singularity. Therefore, even as they emerge into essence powers and further into revealed, particular, distinct powers, each with its own flavor and unique quality, that might be absolutely opposite something else, at its core, not in its source, but at its core, as it is right now, it contains a measure of its opposite inside of it as it is now, because of its origins. Make sense?
Just like men have a little bit of estrogen in them,
Correct.
The opposite, we got a little bit of female.
There's this blending.
Testosterone.
We're about to get into this way of fire and water, and one caveat before we jump into fire and water. I'm not a chemist or a scientist. I know. I'm shocking everyone here today. I know. It's like, how did we not see this? What were we thinking? I'm teaching you what it says in Kabbalah. To make it align with what you and I may or may not know about science. We can have a conversation about that, but to me it's less important than what Kabbalah is teaching about the natures of fire and water. Yeah.
While you were talking, I thought of something that seems impossible, but I've heard this, and you mentioned that a stone does not spontaneously combust.
Right.
But many years ago I heard, and I Googled this term, human spontaneous combustion. And it sounds to me, in other words, that there are times when a human has spontaneously become fire.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that is the essence, even beyond the essence of the Flintstone, where there could be a spark within the human that could be the explanation for this seemingly impossible event.
It's a very interesting thing. I don't know enough to comment. I will tell you that I've seen this happen spiritually.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah. Where people were not planning on it, they were not planning on getting very spiritual or planning on getting inspired, and out of nowhere, suddenly a feeling comes to them, they have to go to shul. They have to study Torah. They have to take a class, right? Spontaneous combustion spiritually. It sounds like physically it's not a good thing. That's what I'm thinking. Without knowing too much about it, it sounds like physically that could be harmful. But spiritually, haven't we all seen this, maybe even in our own lives? Where we weren't planning on it, we didn't set it up, we weren't necessarily consciously climbing that ladder, and the next thing you know, we're on fire in a good way. I'm saying spiritually, we've seen this. And that's certainly because of the spiritual properties in the soul. And the essence is always awake, even if we're not aware that it's awake. How it works does it also evolve into the physical? Very well may. I can't definitively comment about that. I'm gonna choose. I'm gonna pull out.
just one thing, as you talk about the spiritually being on fire, it reminds me of Elie Wiesel's book, Souls on Fire.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what, pleading the fifth is? Yeah? It's like not commenting. I just thought of this right now. 5th chapter of Pirkei Avot says, when you don't know something, say you don't know. So I'm going to plead the fifth regarding this. But the physical part of it, I don't know. That I don't know. But yeah, let's take a look at fire and water. And again, this also, here's what it says in Kabbalah. This concept applies not only in regard to the soul's qualities, but to every component of existence. Look what he says here. In every component in existence that exists, anything that exists, has these states of essence powers, and then reveal particular powers. Everything exists in the same way. Hidden within water, for example, there is the... I study from the Hebrew. I didn't prepare the English. The English is a translation. The Hebrew doesn't qualify with these brackets. So these brackets are throwing me for a slight loop. But I'm ready to roll with it, even though I feel like it's minimizing the message. But maybe they did this because of the science, to make it sound more palatable to the modern mind. Because I still feel that even chemically there's a way to understand this in its literal form. Which I didn't want to offer my own take on it, but I do feel that there's some way, speaking to the right scientists, there's a way to understand what this means, even scientifically. That's my feeling on it. That actually, for me, there's no doubt that there's a way to understand this and not use the mystical concept and just make it metaphysical.
Well, if you take water and you break it apart into just hydrogen, you can take hydrogen and make fire out of it, and then oxygen.
So there you go. There you go.
Call Dr. Imbo.
I was thinking about Imbo. I'm thinking Imbo's probably got. So I got Imbo and speed dial. Dr. Imbo from Chicago. If you don't know him, he spoke a month and a little bit ago, like 6 weeks ago maybe, on quantum physics and Kabbalah. Unbelievable. And so he lives in Chicago. So he just texted me last week. Hey, I ran into my son studies in yeshiva in Chicago. He's like, I was at a Fabrengen, at a gathering, and I saw your son there. Regards from your son. It's very nice. That's just not only is he a scientist, but he's also a mensch. So it was very nice to get that. But yeah, maybe I'll ask him if he has any thoughts on this. But but that concept of on a molecular level, or you have hydrogen in there, makes sense. So let's jump inside. I'll read the brackets because they're there, but I'm hesitating.
We can skip the brackets.
All right, let's skip the brackets. If I have permission, let's skip the brackets. Hidden within water, for example, there is fire. And fire in turn, I'm going to add my own translation here, and fire in turn contains water. So water has fire and fire has water. On some level, again, you want to say it's mystical, I think that's the easy way out. On some level, in the properties of water, there is fire inside there, on some level. And within fire, on some level, there's water. Again, you couldn't come up, I wrote this in the email. If you're not getting the emails, please let me know and I'll make sure to add you to the list, or I'll try to remember to add you to the list. But I wrote in the email, which I sent out last night, because Friday was very short. It's getting very hard to get everything in. So water and fire on a physical plane, it's very hard to find more opposites. It would seem. Fire and water. These are forces that, given left to their own devices, would love nothing more than to utterly destroy each other. Water sees fire, and water's like, let me put you out. And water, right? That's what water does. And fire sees water and says, let me evaporate you. The one looks at the other and seeks the other's destruction. Like literally, I don't mean it's in a malicious way, but I mean just the way it usually plays out, right? It's like a zero-sum game. There will only be here fire or water. One of them will, right? So if you have a little fire and you pour a lot of water, the fire's out. If you have a little water and a big fire, it's going to evaporate that water and make it not water anymore, maybe a different form, but it will cease to be water. So it's a zero-sum game. Only one will survive. Cage match. Fire and water, opposites. His point here is to use the extreme example of fire and water to say that even these two properties, physical, how about the soul and love and chesed and gvura, love and discipline, and how, love has a little discipline. That's easy. Fire and water, that's why I don't like the mystical brackets. Fire and water on the ground, each contains the other. What? Fire and water on the same team? No way. Fire is opposite water. Even fire and water contain a measure of its antithesis, of the other. Let's continue. Hidden within, we'll just restate that second sentence, second paragraph. Hidden within water, for example, there is fire, and fire in turn has water inside of it, although in each case this is utterly indiscernible. He says you're not going to be able to see it, at least with the human eye, even to itself. If you were to ask fire, hey, where's your water? Fire would not recognize, well, it couldn't speak also, but it itself wouldn't recognize its water inside of it in an obvious way, nor would water recognize its fire qualities, any more than a human being would say that I have anything in common with somebody that they believe is their opposite. You with me on that? I just threw that in for fun. And because, obviously, that's where we're going with this, right? So we think we have nothing in common. Fire thinks, I don't have any water in me, and water thinks, I don't have any fire within me. That's my mortal enemy. Okay? Hence, on a revealed level, water and fire, to all appearances, homogeneous. Hence, on a revealed, there's no homogeneous in the original. On a revealed level, water and fire, to all appearances homogeneous, cannot coalesce. Where is this, huh? What did you say?
You think it would be heterogeneous?
No, I think
like
that
they're
they mean
completely apart.
water looks homogeneous and fire looks homogeneous.
What does that mean? That means that they...
Of one kind.
Yeah.
Of one kind.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what it means. Oh, yeah, this will make sense. Okay, so it's fine. It's on me. So on a revealed level, water and fire, how do you pronounce it? Homogeneous? Okay. Homogeneous, so although water and fire look self-contained and distinct and only about fire and water, or water and fire respectively, no, not despite that, but because of that, on a revealed level, they cannot coalesce. Yeah? Sorry for making this more complicated than it is. He's just saying that on a revealed level, even the way they would self-identify, water and fire cannot come together because they are opposites. They are mortal enemies. Not only do you not see the opposite in it, it doesn't see its opposite in it. Okay. However, when water is analyzed and the fire that was within is extracted and revealed, and vice versa, this being the meaning of the statement in Sefer Yetzirah, he extracted fire from water and water from fire. So it seems like on some level, maybe mystically. Okay, you can extract one from the other. So when that happens, the two elements can at this point coalesce. There is a way to bring fire and water together in the same place if you're able to extract the one from the other. In other words, you're able not to extract it to distinguish, but able to draw forth the fire quality within water and the water quality within fire. If you're able to summon forth the fire and water and the water and fire, then the two can coalesce. I can't not translate this immediately into human terms. If you're able to extract from one human being the perspective that someone else shares, as long as they believe that the other person is diametrically opposed to them, then they don't see eye to eye. The moment you're able to reveal to the person that you too can understand their position, their way of seeing things, then you can have two people coming together. So as long as water only sees itself as water and fire only sees itself as fire, there's no coming together. But when the truth of water is revealed to water, that it has fire. And when the truth of fire is revealed to fire, that it also has water. And that's what it means to say for Yitzir, you're extracting water from fire and fire from water. It doesn't mean that you're pulling it out and putting it somewhere else, returning it to the other guy. No. It means that you're highlighting, you're evoking, you're summoning forth the fire and the water and the fire. Now they can come together. The fire within water and the water within fire can be linked, thus uniting water and fire. It's the complementary qualities that each one contains when summoned forth that can unite with the other quality. When water is analyzed and its opposite qualities discovered within, it's distinctive. I like this bracket. These brackets I'm going to go with. Its distinctive power is weakened, i.e., it becomes less absolute when you reveal the antithesis that's truly inside of it. As long as water is only water, then it is very, very distinct. It's very unique, not in a good way. It's very self-contained, and it's very much not going to get along with the other one. The moment you highlight the opposite quality that's inside of it, because it does have the opposite quality, because it also has an essence. And it's not only about the soul that all essences are connected. Even fire and water at its essence state, they are unified. And therefore, even as they come out as distinct beings, fire and water, there is some crossover there. So when you highlight the crossover, necessarily you weaken the ego of the water, being, I'm water, I'm not fire. You're only water? What about the fire? Okay, I'm a little less water. It's interesting. Is the connection because of the opposites, or is the connection born because of the weakening of the primary? Are you with me? It's a philosophical question that he's not answering here. I'm asking this question. Can fire and water come together because of the water within fire, the fire within water, and the water within fire, which is the first statement that he made? Or is it because of the weakening of the water and the fire when the opposite, its opposite inside of it is highlighted? I think it's both.
Say one more time. The two questions? I'm trying to distinguish.
He's saying that water and fire each contain...
No, the question that you were asking.
All right, now let me set this up. He's saying that fire and water each contain the opposite. And his first statement was, when you summon forth the fire and water, and the water within fire, those qualities, not the primary qualities, but those, let's call them secondary or hidden qualities, they are the ones that touch. It's like in any conversation. Like what touches, when two people are communicating, what is touching? So, right, not the essence, sometimes maybe, but not the essence of the essence. It's like what we're each saying is touching. Like the point of touch is the most external part, right? It's the surface part. So which two surfaces are touching when we're talking about the coalescence of water and fire? Which surfaces are touching? It's the fire and the water within fire. Those deeper forces, the antithetical forces that were summoned forth, those are the two pieces that are touching. But then he says that when you analyze, when you discover the fire and water, the water within fire, then water becomes less about water, uniquely water, solely about water. Water becomes also about fire, and fire becomes also about water. And so my question is it about those deeper forces touching, or is it about the primary, original force weakening? And I think it's both.
Is it weakening? I'm wondering, weakening, I'm thinking blurring more, because the weakening would be one against the other. So
weakening means within itself. How strongly does it identify as water?
It's becoming more selfless.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Canceled.
Huh?
It's canceled or sublimated.
Yes, sublimated.
Yeah.
In other words, how identity, straight up identity. How strongly does it identify as water? As long as it's exclusively identifying as water, and that's exclusively identifying as fire, they cannot get along. By their own natures, fire and water can't get along, right? But when it identifies as also a little bit of fire, and this one identifies a little bit of water, then the new identifications can touch. That's one way of looking at it. Or the original identities have been weakened. Once that's weakened, now they can come together. I think both are true. I don't want to point it position as one or the other. I think both are true. Let's just finish this paragraph and we'll start chapter 7 next time. So let's continue. When I'll just go back one sentence. When water is analyzed and its opposite quality is discovered within, its distinctive power is weakened. That's why I use the word weakened. But it means it's less identified as solely that primary quality or being. The same is true in the case of fire, right? And this weakening, again using weakening, but really bittul, sublimation, makes it possible for them to come together. So he says both. Thus, it is this division that is the cause of their mutual incorporation. Wow. This just walloped us one more point. This is a new point. Not a new point, but a new point for us. Not even a new point for us, but a new point for right now. What causes them to come together? The analysis. In other words, breaking it down into different components, which usually creates more pieces that are dissimilar, but in this case, it's creating points that are similar. Crossover touch points. Are you with me on this? Mm-hmm. We said before that intellectual analysis, the problem with that is you take an idea, objective idea, and you break it down. How I understand it, now it's me versus you. So we've created now friction, conflict. But go deeper.
Break it down further.
Go deeper. Go really deep. At the deepest core, you're going to find more components and more commonalities. In my way of thinking, I have this way of thinking. But I can see also your way of thinking in my thinking. And you can see my way of thinking in your way of thinking. Keep on breaking it down with the chachma, guiding the process of bina and dat. When chachma, humility, guides the process of breaking it down, the breaking down does not become the cause of strife and conflict, but the greatest ally for oneness and unity, harmony, and coalescence. And with this, we conclude Chapter 6. Thank you very much for joining me today for Kabbalah and Coffee.
Thank you so much. So were Hillel and Shammai able to...
Yes, they were never about. By the way, sorry for not going again and rehashing and kind of summarizing it. I wanted to end there because we're a little after the time and it's Erev Chanukah and everyone's got stuff to do. So, the question about Hillel and Shammai, 100%. Hillel and Shammai were not at all